External sector in India. No country in today's globalized world can be fully insulated from what happens in the global economy, and India is no exception to the rule. As the country is increasingly integrated into the world, it cannot remain impervious to developments abroad. The unfolding of the Eurozone crisis and uncertainty surrounding the global economy have impacted the Indian economy, causing drop in growth, higher current account deficit, and declining capital inflows. Definition: all economic activities of an economy which take place in foreign currency fall in the external sectors such as export, import, foreign investment, external debt, current account, capital account, balance of payment, etc. Definition: Forex reserves. The total foreign currencies of different countries an economy possesses at a point of time is its foreign currency assets or reserves. The forex reserves, short for foreign exchange reserves, of an economy is its foreign currency assets added with its gold reserves, SDRs, special drawing rights, and reserve tranche position, RTP, in the IMF. In a sense, the forex reserves is the upper limit up to which an economy can manage foreign currency in normal times if need be. By January 2020, as per the RBI, the details related to India's forex reserves were as given below. Compared with January 2019, foreign exchange reserves were at $461.2 billion, up from $28 billion, and India's total special drawing rights, SDRs, of $13.1 billion with the IMF, inclusive of reserve tranche position, i.e., 25% of the total SDRs, if they have not been used. Forex provided an import cover of 11 months, down from 11.5 months. Import cover of reserves is a trade-based indicator of reserve adequacy, which is an important parameter in gauging a country's ability to absorb external shocks. Forex cover ratio of external debt was at 82.5%, up from 77.8%. External debt. As India started managing its balance of payment in a more prudent way after the reform period, its external debt position has also improved in a big way. As per the standard practice, India's external debt statistics are released with a lag of 1 quarter. The major details, up to September 2019, released by the RBI on 31st December 2019, compared with March 2019, were as given below. Total external debt was at $557.4 billion, a rise of $47.0 billion. This rise was mainly caused by two reasons. Firstly, an increase in commercial borrowings and non-resident Indian (NRI) deposits, and secondly, valuation losses resulting from the appreciation of the US dollar against the Indian rupee and major currencies. The external debt to GDP ratio stood at 21%, higher than 20.8% of March 2019. The ratio is based on external debt and GDP valued in rupee terms. Debt service ratio at 7.0%, rising from 6.5%. This means that India pays 7.0% of its exports earnings to pay the external debt, inclusive of principal and interest. Commercial borrowings, i.e., ECBs, continued to be the largest component of external debt, with a share of 39.1%, followed by NRI deposits, 24.0%, and short-term trade credit, 20.1%. US dollar-denominated debt continued to be the largest component at 49.5%, followed by the Indian rupee, 37.2%, SDR, 5.6%, yen, 4.3%, and euro, 3.1%. The share of long-term debt in total external debt was 79.6%, falling from 80.7% of March 2019. The share of short-term debt, with original maturity of up to 1 year, in total external debt increased to 20.4%, falling from 19.3%. Concessional debt of the total debt was 9%, lower than 9.1%. Government debt of the total debt was 21.2%, down from 21.6%. Fixed currency regime. The fixed currency regime is a method of regulating exchange rates of world currencies brought by the IMF. In this system, exchange rate of a particular currency was fixed by the IMF, keeping the currency in front of a basket of important world currencies. They were UK pound, US dollar, Japanese yen, German mark diem, and the French franc FFR. Different economies were supposed to maintain that particular exchange rate in future. Exchange rates of currencies were modified by the IMF from time to time. Floating currency regime. The floating currency regime is a method of regulating exchange rates of world currencies based on the market mechanism, i.e., demand and supply. In the follow-up to the fixed currency system of exchange rate determination, it was the UK which blamed the system for its payment crisis of late 1960s. Looking at the major loopholes in this system, the UK government decided to switch over to the floating currency regime in 1973. The same year, the IMF allowed an option to its member countries to go for either of the currency systems. In the floating exchange rate system, a domestic currency is left free to float against a number of foreign currencies in its foreign exchange market and determine its own value. Such exchange rates are also called as market-driven or based exchange rates, which are regulated by factors such as the demand and supply of the domestic and the foreign currencies in the concerned economy. Managed exchange rates. A managed exchange rate system is a hybrid or mixture of the fixed and flexible exchange rate systems in which the government of the economy attempts to affect the exchange rate directly by buying or selling foreign currencies or indirectly through monetary policy, i.e., by lowering or raising interest rates on foreign currency bank accounts, affecting foreign investment, etc. Today, most of the economies have shifted to this system of exchange rate determination. Almost all countries tend to intervene when the markets become disorderly or the fundamentals of economics are challenged by the exchange rate of the time. Some of the major examples of the managed exchange rate system have been given below. 1. Some countries allow to free float their currencies and allow the market forces to determine their exchange rate with rare government intervention. This is the idea from which the floating currency regime basically emerged. The USA and the EU are the major examples in this category. 2. Some economies have managed but flexible exchange rates, under which the governments buy or sell its currency to reduce day-to-day volatility of currency fluctuations and sometimes go for systematic intervention for desired objectives. Canada and Japan fall in this category, besides many developing countries. India too falls under this category, which follows the dual currency regime. Since 1992 to 93 financial year. 3. Some economies, particularly small ones, peg their currencies to a major currency or to a basket of currency in a fixed exchange rate, known as the pegging of currencies. At times, the peg is allowed to glide smoothly upward or downward, a system which is known as gliding or crawling peg. Some economies have a hard fix of a currency board. A currency board is working well in Hong Kong while the same failed in Argentina in 2002. Foreign exchange market. The market where different currencies can be bought and sold is called the foreign exchange market. Out of the trades in different currencies, the exchange rate of the currency is determined by the economy. This is an institutional framework for the exchange of one national currency for another. This is particularly correct either in the case of a free float exchange, i.e., floating currency, regime, or is a managed or hybrid exchange rate system. It is altogether not allowed either in a fixed currency system or a hard fix. In a hard fix, this happens once the currency to which the hard fix has been done itself starts fluctuating. Exchange rate in India. Indian currency, the rupee, was historically linked with the British pound sterling till 1948, which was fixed as far back as 1928. Once the IMF came up, India shifted to the fixed currency system, committed to maintain rupee's external value, i.e., exchange rate, in terms of gold or the US $1. In September 1975, India delinked rupee from the British pound, and the RBI started determining rupee's exchange rate with respect to the exchange rate movements of the basket of world currencies, pound, dollar, yen, diem, FR. This was an arrangement between the fixed and the floating currency regimes. In 1992-93 financial year, India moved to the floating currency regime with its own method, which is known as the dual exchange rate. There are two exchange rates for rupee, one is the official rate and the other is the market rate. Here the point should be noted that it is the everyday changing market-based exchange rate of rupee which affects the official exchange rate and not the other way round. But the RBI may intervene in the forex market via the demand and supply of rupee or the foreign currencies. Another point which should be kept in mind is that none of the economies have till date followed an ideal free-floating exchange rate. They require some mechanism to intervene in the foreign exchange market because this is a highly speculative market. Trade balance. The monetary difference of the total export and import of an economy in one financial year is called trade balance. It might be positive or negative, known to be either favorable or unfavorable, respectively, to the economy. Trade policy. Broadly speaking, the economic policy, which regulates the export-import activities of any economy, is known as the trade policy. It is also called the foreign trade policy or the EXIM policy. This policy needs regular modifications depending upon the economic policies of the economies of the world or the trading partners. Depreciation. This term is used to mean two different things. In foreign exchange market, it is a situation when domestic currency loses its value in front of a foreign currency if it is market-driven. It means depreciation in a currency can only take place if the economy follows the floating exchange rate system. In domestic economy, depreciation means an asset losing its value due to either its use, wear and tear, or due to other economic reasons. Depreciation here means wear and tear. This is also known as capital consumption. Every economy has an official annual rates for different assets at which fixed assets are considered depreciating. Devaluation. In the foreign exchange market, when exchange rate of a domestic currency is cut down by its government against any foreign currency, it is called devaluation. It means official depreciation is devaluation. Revaluation. A term used in foreign exchange market which means a government increasing the exchange rate of its currency against any foreign currency. It is official appreciation. Appreciation. In foreign exchange market, if a free-floating domestic currency increases its value against the value of a foreign currency, it is appreciation. In domestic economy, if a fixed asset has seen increase in its value, it is also known as appreciation. Appreciation rates for different assets are not fixed by any government as they depend upon many factors which are unseen. Current account. It has two meanings. One is related to the banking sector and the other to the external sector. 1. In the banking industry, a business firm's bank account is known as current account. The account is in the name of a firm run by authorized person or persons, in which no interest is paid by the bank on the deposits. Every withdrawal from the account takes place by checks with limitations on the number of deposits and withdrawals in a single day. The overdraft facility or the cash cum credit (CC) account facility to business firms is offered by the banks on this account only. 2. In the external sector, it refers to the account maintained by every government of the world in which every kind of current transactions is shown. Basically, this account is maintained by the central banking body of the economy on behalf of the government. Current transactions of an economy in foreign currency all over the world are export, import, interest payments, private remittances, and transfers. All transactions are shown as either inflow or outflow, credit or debit. At the end of the year, the current account might be positive or negative. The positive one is known as a surplus current account, and the negative one is known as a deficit current account. India had surplus current accounts for 3 consecutive years, 2003, the only such period in Indian economic history. As per the Economic Survey 2019-20, the current account deficit (CD) of India was 2.1% for 2018-19, which dropped to 1.5% in the first half of 2019-20, from 2.7% of the same period of the preceding year. Lower CAD reflects reduced external indebtedness of the country, making domestic economic policy increasingly independent of external influence. By April 2020, the sustainable level of CAD for the country was projected by the RBI in the range of 2.00 to 2.50%. Capital account. Every government of the world maintains a capital account, which shows the capital kind of transactions of the economy with outside economies. Every transaction in foreign currency, inflow or outflow, considered as capital is shown in this account: external lending and borrowing, foreign currency deposits of banks, external bonds issued by the Government of India, FDI, PIS, and security market investment of the QFIs. Rupee is fully convertible in this case. There is no deficit or surplus in this account like the current account. Balance of payment, BOP. The outcome of the total transactions of an economy with the outside world in 1 year is known as the balance of payment, BOP, of the economy. Basically, it is the net outcome of the current and capital accounts of an economy. It might be favorable or unfavorable for the economy. However, negativity of the BOP does not mean it is unfavorable. A negative BOP is unfavorable for an economy if only the economy lacks the means to fill the gap of negativity. The BOP of an economy is calculated on the principles of accountancy, double-entry bookkeeping, and looks like the balance sheet of a company. Every entry shown either as credit, inflow, or debit, outflow. If there is a positive outcome at the end of the year, the money is automatically transferred to the foreign exchange reserves of the economy. And if there is any negative outcome, the same foreign exchange is drawn from the country's forex reserves. If the forex reserves are not capable of fulfilling the negativity created by the war, it is known as a war crisis, and the economy tries different means to solve the crisis, in which going for forex help from the IMF is the last resort. Convertibility. An economy might allow its currency full or partial convertibility in the current and the capital accounts. If domestic currency is allowed to convert into foreign currency for all current account purposes, it is a case of full current account convertibility. Similarly, in cases of capital outflow, if the domestic currency is allowed to convert into foreign currency, it is a case of full capital account convertibility. If the situation is of partial convertibility, then the portion allowed by the government can be converted into foreign currency for current and capital purposes. It should always be kept in mind that the issue of currency convertibility is concerned with foreign currency outflow only. Convertibility in India. India's foreign exchange earning capacity was always poor, and hence it had all possible provisions to check the foreign exchange outflow, be it for current purposes or capital purposes. Remember the draconian FARA. But the process of economic reforms has changed the situation to unidentifiable levels. Current account. Current account is today fully convertible, operationalized on 19 August 1994. It means that the full amount of the foreign exchange required by someone for current purposes will be made available to him at official exchange rate, and there could be an unprohibited outflow of foreign exchange. Earlier it was partially convertible. India was obliged to do so as per Article 8 of the IMF, which prohibits any exchange restrictions on current international transactions. Keep in mind that India was under preconditions of the IMF since 1991. Capital account. After the recommendations of the S.S. Tarapur Committee, 1997, on capital account convertibility, India has been moving in the direction of allowing full convertibility in this account, but with required precautions. India is still a country of partial convertibility, 40-60, in the capital account, but inside this overall policy, enough reforms have been made, and to certain levels of foreign exchange requirements, it is an economy allowing full capital account convertibility. 1. Indian corporates are allowed full convertibility in the automatic route up to $500 million overseas ventures. Investment by limited companies in foreign countries allowed per annum. 2. Indian corporates are allowed to prepay their external commercial borrowings, ECBs, via automatic route if the loan is above $500 million per annum. 3. Individuals are allowed to invest in foreign assets, shares, etc., up to the level of $250,000 per annum. 4. Unlimited amount of gold is allowed to be imported. This is equal to allowing full convertibility in capital account via current account route, but not feasible for everybody, which is not allowed now. The Second Committee on the Capital Account Convertibility, CAC, again chaired by S.S. Tarapur, handed over its report in September 2006, on which the RBI or the government is having consultations. LERMS. India announced the Liberalized Exchange Rate Mechanism System, LERMS, in the Union Budget 1992-93, and in March 1993 it was operationalized. India delinked its currency from the fixed currency system and moved into the era of floating exchange rate system under it. Indian form of exchange rate is known as the dual exchange rate. One exchange rate of rupee is official and the other is market-driven. The market-driven exchange rate shows the actual tendencies of the foreign currency demand, and supply in the economy vis-a-vis the domestic currency. It is the market-driven exchange rate which affects the official rate and not the other way round. NIR. The nominal effective exchange rate, NIR, of the rupee is a weighted average of exchange rates before the currencies of India's major trading partners. RIA. When the weight of inflation is adjusted with the NIR, we get the real effective exchange rate, RER, of the rupee. Since inflation has been on the higher side in recent months, the RER of the rupee has been more against it than the NIR. EFF. The Extended Fund Facility, EFF, is a service provided by the IMF to its member countries which authorizes them to raise any amount of foreign exchange from it to fulfill their BOP crisis, but on the conditions of structural reforms in the economy put by the body. It is the first agreement of its kind. India had signed this agreement with the IMF in the financial year 1981-82. IMF conditions on India. The BOP crisis of the early 1990s made India borrow from the IMF, which came on some conditions. The medium-term loan to India was given for the restructuring of the economy on the following conditions. 1. Devaluation of rupee by 22%, done in 2 consecutive fortnights. Rupee fell from 21 to 27 against every US dollar. 2. Drastic custom cut to a peak duty of 30%, from the erstwhile level of 130% for all goods. 3. Excise duty to be increased by 20% to neutralize the loss of revenue due to custom cut. 4. Government expenditure to be cut by 10% per annum, the burden of salaries, pensions, subsidies, etc. The above given conditions to which India was obliged were vehemently opposed by the Indian corporate sector, opposition in the parliament, and majority of Indians. But by the end of 1999 to 2000, when India saw the multiple benefits accruing out of the ongoing reforms, there was no ideological opposition to the idea. It should always be kept in mind that the nature of structural reforms India went through were guided and decided by these preconditions of the IMF. This is how the direction of structural reforms of an economy are regulated by the IMF in the process of strengthening the BOP position of the crisis-driven economy. The purpose has been served in the Indian case. India has not only fulfilled these conditions, but it has also moved ahead. Hard currency. It is the international currency in which the highest faith is shown and is needed by every economy. The strongest currency of the world is one which has a high level of liquidity. Basically, the economy with the highest as well as highly diversified exports that are compulsive imports for other countries, as of high-level technology, defense products, life-saving medicines and petroleum products, will also create high demand for its currency in the world and become the hard currency. It is always scarce. Up to the Second World War, the best hard currency was the pound sterling, pound, of the UK, but soon it was replaced by the US dollar. Some of the best hard currencies of the world today are the US dollar, the euro, Japanese yen, and the UK sterling pound, pound. Meanwhile, by late 2015, the IMF allowed the SDR to be denominated in the Chinese yuan, paving the way for a new hard currency, which was implemented in 2016. Soft currency. A term used in the foreign exchange market which denotes the currency that is easily available in any economy in its forex market. For example, rupee is a soft currency in the Indian forex market. It is basically the opposite term for the hard currency. Hot currency. Hot currency is a term of the forex market and is a temporary name for any hard currency. Due to certain reasons, if a hard currency is exiting an economy at a fast pace for the time, the hard currency is known to be hot. As in the case of the Asian crisis, the US dollar had become hot. Heated currency. A term used in the forex market to denote the domestic currency, which is under enough pressure, heat, of depreciation due to a hard currency's high tendency of exiting the economy, since it has become hot. It is also known as currency under heat or under hammering. Cheap currency. A term first used by the economist J. M. Keynes, 1930s. If a government starts repurchasing its bonds before their maturities, at full maturity prices, the money which flows into the economy is known as the cheap currency, also called cheap money. In the banking industry, it means a period of comparatively lower or softer interest rates regime. Dear currency. This term was popularized by economists in early 1930s to show the opposite of the cheap currency. When a government issues bonds, the money which flows from the public to the government or the money in the economy in general is called dear currency, also called as dear money. In the banking industry, it means a period of comparatively higher or costlier interest rates regime. Special Economic Zone. The Special Economic Zone, says, policy was announced by the government in 2000, which was concretized through the CES Act, 2005. It mainly aims to develop export hubs in the country to promote growth and development. As an idea, it was not new. India had set up Asia's first export processing zone, EPZ, in Kandla in 1965 itself. Later on, the idea got another encouragement through the export-oriented units, EOUs. After the CES policy was formalized through an act, the EOUs and EPZs are open to conversion to CES. The CES can be set up by either the GOI, states or even private sector, in all three sectors of the economy: agriculture, industry and services. As per the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, the principal objectives behind creating CES in the country include 1. Generation of additional economic activity, 2. Promotion of exports of goods and services, 3. Promotion of investment from domestic and foreign sources, 4. Creation of employment opportunities, and 5. Development of infrastructure facilities. Recent steps till March 2020 taken by the government to strengthen CES in the country are as given below. Minimum land area requirement for setting up of new CES has been reduced to 50% for multi-product and sector-specific CES. Sectoral broadbanding has been introduced to encompass similar and related areas under the same sector. A new sector, agro-based food processing sector, has been introduced to encourage agro-based industries in CES. Food processing getting government's nod by late 2016 for 100% FDI buy is expected to give a big push to it. Dual use of facilities like social and commercial infrastructure by CES and non-CES entities has been allowed in order to make CES operations more viable. Online processing of various activities relating to CES for improving ease of doing business. CES India mobile app launched to help the CES to track their transactions on CES online system, launched in January 2017. By March 2020, the government had approved 432 proposals for setting up CES, in addition to 7 CES of the GOI and 11 of states or private sector, which were set up prior to the enactment of the CES Act, 2005, out of which 231 CES are operational. Today, the CES are invested with 4.80 lakh rupees crore and have created 17.11 lakh employment. They have 21% share in India's total exports. In recent times, the cess have lost their original synergy due to global economic slowdown, which followed the Great Recession among the developed economies. Meanwhile, the government has been taking various steps to encourage them. GAR. The GAR, General Anti-Avoidance Rules, originally proposed in the Direct Taxes Code 2010, are targeted at arrangements or transactions made specifically to avoid taxes. The objective of the GAR provisions is to codify the doctrine of substance over form, where the real intention of the parties and purpose of an arrangement is taken into account for determining the tax consequences, irrespective of the legal structure of the concerned transaction or arrangement. It essentially comes into effect where an arrangement is entered into with the main purpose or one of the main purposes of obtaining a tax benefit, and which also satisfies at least one of the following four tests. 1. The arrangement creates rights and obligations that are not at arm's length. 2. It results in misuse or abuse of provisions of tax laws. 3. Lacks commercial substance or is deemed to lack commercial substance. Or 4. It is not carried out in a bona fide manner. Thus, if the tax officer believes that the main purpose or one of the main purposes of an arrangement is to obtain a tax benefit, and even if one of the above four tests are satisfied, the tax officer has powers to declare it as an impermissible avoidance arrangement and recharacterize the entire transaction in a manner that is more conducive to maximizing tax revenues. After a prolonged period of postponement, the rule was finally enforced in 2017-18. In the wake of several apprehensions raised by the stakeholders, a working group was set by the CBDT on it. Certain clarifications were also announced by the government, as per which the GAR will not apply if the jurisdiction of FPI, i.e., indirect foreign investment in India, is finalized based on non-tax commercial considerations and the main purpose of the arrangement is not to obtain tax benefit. On the right of the taxpayer to select or choose method of implementing a transaction. On the investments made prior to 1st April 2017. On the cases which are covered by tax treaties. On the cases where the court has explicitly and adequately considered the tax implications. On an arrangement held as permissible by the authority for advance rulings. The proposal to apply this rule will be vetted at two stages, first by the Principal Commissioner or Commissioner of Income Tax, and the second by an approving panel headed by a Judge of High Court. The stakeholders have been assured by the government of adequate procedural safeguards to make it a uniform, fair and rational tax, aimed at certainty and clarity in tax rules. Foreign investment. Though the importance of foreign investment in the economy was realized by the government by late 1980s, it was only liberalized after the country commenced the process of the economic reforms in 1991. In 1991 itself, India opened up to inflows of direct and indirect forms of foreign investments, more emphasis being on the former for being more durable and beneficial to the economy. Since then, much water has flown in the area, and today India is among the highest recipients of FDI, foreign direct investment, in the world. In 2016-17 being the topmost recipient in the world, it is one of the aims of the Make in India initiative. By now, most of the sectors are open for 100% FDI, while all categories of the investors are allowed to invest in the security market of the country. Pushing in favor of enhanced inflows of foreign investment, related policy was further liberalized with the following changes. 1. the single brand retail trading, SBRT, is now open for 100% FDI under automatic route. 2. The construction and real estate brokerage open to receive 100% FDI under automatic route. 3. Aviation sector allowed to receive 49% FDI under automatic route. It includes the public sector aviation company Air India also. 4. Foreign institutional investments or foreign portfolio investments, FIIs or FPIs, has been allowed in power distribution over and above the FDI limit of 49% under automatic route. Earlier, it used to be allowed, but under the overall FDI limit. 5. The marketplace-based model of e-commerce sector has been allowed to receive 100% FDI under the automatic route. But this ease came with a rider. Sales of any vendor through them or its group companies limited to 25% of the total sales of such vendor. 6. In case of FDI in the pharma sector, the reference to Drugs and Cosmetics Act has been dropped, making things easier for the investors. Foreign investment in the country has been rising as a result of continuous liberalization done by the governments in the foreign investment policy. The present foreign investment position of the country is as given below. FDI inflows. During April to November 2019, the net foreign direct investment, FDI, in the country was $92.51 billion to $163.87 billion. However, net FDI's financing of CAD in the first half of the 2019-20 has been higher than the same period of the preceding year. An increase in net FDI also provides a more stable source of funding the current account deficit, and in that sense provides greater stability to the improvement in BOP position as compared to other capital inflows. FPI inflows. During April to November 2019, the net foreign portfolio investment, FPI, in the country was $12.6 billion. In 2018 to 19, there was a net portfolio outflow from the country that was seen as weakening of confidence of investors in India's economy. However, portfolio flows in the first half of 2019 to 20 turned positive, which could be attributed to the dovish monetary policy stance of the Central Bank of the USA, enhanced liquidity in global markets, and reinforced growth prospects and reform measures. The debt-equity composition of net FPI matters in terms of impacting servicing of external debt. A lower debt component reduces the debt servicing burden and improves the BOP position. In recent quarters until Q1 of 2019 to 2020, a change in the composition of FPI flows towards more non-debt creating equity and investment funds is discernible. However, on the flip side, increase in investment in debt instruments is important to deepen the debt market in the country. As per the RBI report, November 2019, on assessment of India's BOP in 2018 to 2019 stated that the highest FPI outflow in the debt segment took place from the sovereign sector, i.e., G6. In this regard, the recent policy initiatives of enhancing investment limits of FPIs in government securities and easing of minimum residual maturity are likely to boost FPI flows. In April 2018, RBI revised the limit for FPI investment in the G6, wherein the limit was increased by 0.5% each year to 5.5% of outstanding stock of securities in 2018 to 19 and 6% of outstanding stock of securities in 2019 to 20. An increase in net FPI flows improves the BOP position and arises on account of cross-border transactions involving debt or equity securities other than those included in direct investment or reserve assets. However, FPI is often referred to as hot money because of its tendency to flee at the first signs of trouble in an economy or improvement in investment attractiveness elsewhere in the world, particularly in the US, at the hands of the Federal Reserve. ECB liberalized. With the changing dynamics of economy, India's needs for foreign loans have also gone for a change. Though the RBI has been quite careful about higher exposure to the external loans, its overall policy stance regarding it has been liberal. Following this stance, the external commercial borrowing (ECB) norms were further liberalized by the RBI. By April 2020, the related policy framework was as given below. All eligible borrowers to raise up to $10 billion for working capital purposes with a minimum average maturity period of 3 years under the automatic route without mandatory hedging. This move is aimed at curbing volatility in the forex market arising out of dollar demand for crude oil purchases. Manufacturing companies allowed up to $50 million of ECB per year with a maturity of 1 year. In case of ECB being raised from a foreign equity holder and utilized for working capital, general corporate purposes or repayment of rupee loans, the maturity period will be 5 years. In place of putting sectoral cap, the RBI decided to set an overall prudential limit on the ECB at 6.5% of the GDP. It was for the first time that the RBI put such an open idea in the public domain. Till now, it was managed through its internal benchmark, which never used to be available in the public domain. As per the Economic Survey 2019-20, the dynamics of ECB in India has gone for a change in recent years. While domestic bank credit growth has remained subdued in recent years, credit through the ECB route has witnessed significant growth since 2017-18. The increasing preference of corporates for the ECB route may be attributed to two set of factors, global and domestic. 1. Global factors favoring the ECB, A. Low global interest rates, and B. Higher availability of funds in global financial market. 2. Domestic factors encouraging the ECB, A. Liberalization of ECBs, B. Rationalization of all-in cost of ECBs, C. Expansion of list of eligible borrowers, D. Removal of sector-wise borrowing limits on ECB up to $750 million, and E. Allowing oil marketing companies to raise up to $10 billion for working capital. An increase in net ECBs improves the BOP position, but it worsened the BOP by turning negative during 2014-19, $42.80 billion. However, in 2018-19 and the first half of 2019-20, the net ECB inflows were $9.76 billion respectively. Risks in foreign currency borrowings. Corporate borrowers in India and other emerging economies are keen to borrow in foreign currency to benefit from lower interest and longer terms of credit. Such borrowings, however, are not always helpful, especially in times of high currency volatility. During good times, domestic borrowers could enjoy triple benefits of 1. Lower interest rates, 2. Longer maturity, and 3. Capital gains. Due to domestic currency appreciation. This would happen when the local currency is appreciating due to surge in capital flows and the debt service liability is falling in domestic currency terms. The opposite would happen when the domestic currency is depreciating due to reversal of capital flows during crisis situations, as happened during the 2008 global crisis. A sharp depreciation in local currency would mean corresponding increase in debt service liability, as more domestic currency would be required to buy the same amount of foreign exchange for debt service payments. This would lead to erosion in profit margin and have mark-to-market implications for the corporate. There would also be debt overhang problem, as the volume of debt would rise in local currency terms. Together, these factors could create corporate distress, especially because the rupee tends to depreciate precisely when the Indian economy is also under stress and corporate revenues and margins are under pressure. In this context, it is felt that one of the factors contributing to faster recovery of the Indian economy after the 2008 global crisis was the low level of corporate external debt. As a result, the significant decline in the value of rupee did not have a major fallout for the corporate balance sheets. Foreign currency borrowings, therefore, have to be contracted carefully, especially when no natural hedge is available. Such natural hedge would happen when a foreign currency borrower also has an export market for its products. As a result, export receivables would offset, at least to some extent, the currency risk inherent in debt service payments. This happens because fall in the value of the rupee that leads to higher debt service payments is partly compensated by the increase in the value of rupee receivables through exports. When export receivables and the currency of borrowings is different, the prudent approach is for corporations to enter currency swaps to redenominate asset and liability in the same currency to create natural hedge. Unfortunately, too many Indian corporations with little foreign currency earnings leave foreign currency borrowings unhedged, so as to profit from low international interest rates. This is a dangerous gamble for reasons described above and should be avoided. Trade promotion. Several new initiatives have been taken by the government in recent times, till March 2020, to promote external trade and foreign investments, FDI as well as FPI, in the economy adopting internationally benchmarked best practices. Major ones are as given below. 1. E-filing and e-payment. Applications for various trade services can be filed online, and application fees paid through electronic transfer. The number of mandatory documents required for exports and imports has also been cut down to just 3 each, which is comparable with international benchmarks. 2. Single window for customs. Under this project, that importers and exporters electronically submit their customs clearance documents at a single point with customs. Permissions required from other regulatory agencies, such as Animal Quarantine, Plant Quarantine, Drug Controller and Textile Committee, could be obtained online without the having to separately approach these agencies. The single window is aimed at providing importers or exporters a single-point interface for customs clearance, thereby reducing personal interface with governmental agencies, dwell time and cost of doing business. 3. 24x7 customs clearance. The facility of 24x7 customs clearance has been made available at 18 seaports and 17 air cargo complexes. This move is aimed at faster clearance of import and export, reducing dwell time and lowering the transaction cost. 4. Paperless environment. The government aims to move towards a paperless 24x7 working trade environment. A new facility has been created to upload documents in exporter or importer profile so that exporters are not required to submit documents repeatedly. 5. Simplification. Attention has also been paid to simplifying various ayat niryat forms, bringing in clarity in different provisions, removing ambiguities, and enhancing electronic governance. A mobile application also launched by the DGFT, Director General of Foreign Trade, in October 2016. 6. Training or outreach, Niryat Bandhu Scheme, a training or outreach program is aimed at Skill India, organized at MSME, micro, small and medium enterprises, clusters with the help of export promotion councils, EPCs, and other willing industry partners and knowledge partners. The DGFT, in collaboration with the IIFT, Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, has launched Niryat Bandhu at Your Desktop, an online certificate program in export-import business. Another training program has been launched by the Department of Commerce, DOC, for exporters located in the major export clusters or cities. It focuses on training exporters to utilize Free Trade Agreements, FTA. 7. Participation of states or UTs. In July 2015, a Council for Trade Development and Promotion, CTDP, was set up to ensure continuous dialogue with the governments of states or union territories, UTs, on measures for providing an international trade-enabling environment and for making them active partners in boosting India's exports. 8. Once 90% of the FDI inflows are now under automatic route together with fully converted to online procedure, the multi-ministerial body Foreign Investment Promotion Board, FIPB, was abolished in 2018. Now, the FDI proposals not coming under the automatic route will be considered by either the concerned ministries or the regulatory body. 9. Angel tax reforms. To promote the upcoming startups, the government eased out the norms related to application of the angel tax. Now, investments up to 25 crores rupees in a startup will be exempt from the tax. Exemption will be also available to investment made by listed company of a net worth of at least 100 crore rupees or a turnover of at least 250 crores rupees. An eligible startup would be one that is registered with the government and has been incorporated for less than 10 years and has a turnover of not more 100 crores rupees over that period. The Government of India has requested the state or UTs to develop their export strategy, appoint export commissioners, address infrastructure constraints restricting movement of goods, facilitate refund of value-added tax, VAT, or OCTRA or state-level cess, address other issues relating to various clearances, and build capacity of new exporters in order to promote exports. Export promotion schemes. Aimed at enhancing countries' export share in the global trade, the government has been running several export promotion schemes. In the wake of shrinking global markets for exports in recent years, government has tried to give extra emphasis on them along with launching several new schemes in this regard. Some of the major ongoing schemes, as per the Economic Survey 2019-20, are being briefed below. MACE, Merchandise Exports from India Scheme, launched in April 2015, its objective is to offset infrastructural inefficiencies and associated costs involved in exporting products produced in India. The scheme incentivizes exporters in terms of duty credit scrips at the rate 2, 3, 4, 5, 7% of free on board form value of exports realized. These scrips are transferable and can be used to pay certain central duties and taxes. In March 2020, the government announced to replace this scheme by a WTO-compliant scheme will reimburse all taxes and duties paid on inputs consumed in exports to the exporters. The new scheme, Remission of Duties or Taxes on Export Products, RoDTEP, will end-to-end digitized. Says, Services Exports from India Scheme. Under this scheme, rewards in the form of duty credit scrips are given to the exporters of services on their net foreign exchange earnings. The scrips, just like MACE, are transferable and can be used to pay certain central duties and taxes. the service exporters are eligible for cess at the rate of 5% and 7% of the net foreign exchange earnings, NFE. EPCG, Export Promotion Capital Goods Scheme. This scheme allows exporters to import capital goods, except certain specified items under the scheme, for pre-production, production and post-production at zero customs duty. In return, the exporters are required to fulfill the export obligation to the tune of 6 times the import duties, taxes and cess saved amount on capital goods, to be fulfilled in 6 years. These imports are also exempt from the IGST till March 2020. AS, Advance Authorization Scheme. Advance Authorization is issued to allow duty-free import of inputs, such as fuel, oil and catalyst, which are physically incorporated in export products. DFIA, Duty-Free Import Authorization. This is issued on post-export basis for products for which standard input-output norms, SIAN, have been notified. One of the objectives of the scheme is to facilitate transfer of the authorization or the inputs imported as per SIAN once export is completed. Provisions of DFIA scheme are similar to Advance Authorization Scheme. IES, Interest Equalization Scheme, launched for a period of 5 years, 2015 to 2020. The scheme is being implemented by the DGFT, Directorate General of Foreign Trade, through RBI for pre- and post-shipment rupee export credit. Eligible exporters avail interest equalization at the rate of 3% per annum, increased to 5% in November 2018 for MSME sector. EOU or EHTP or STP or BTP scheme. The objectives of these 4 schemes, i.e., Export-Oriented Units, EOU, Electronic Hardware Technology Park, EHTP, Software Technology Parks, STP, and Biotechnology Parks, BTP, scheme are to promote exports, enhance foreign exchange earnings, attract investment for export production and employment generation. The units, other than trading firms, undertaking to export their entire production of goods and services, except permissible sales in DTA, may be set up under the schemes which are permitted to import inputs without payment of customs duty. This deemed export scheme. Deemed exports refer to those transactions in which the goods supplied do not leave the country, and the payment for such supplies is received either in Indian rupees or in free foreign exchange. Under the scheme, exemption or refund of duties on manufactured products are given to ensure a level playing field to domestic manufacturers. TMA, Transport and Marketing Assistance for Specified Agriculture Products scheme, launched in February 2019. It aims to mitigate the disadvantage of higher cost of transportation of export of specified agriculture products due to transshipment and to promote brand recognition for Indian agricultural products in specified overseas markets for the period between March 2019 and March 2020. TIES, Trade Infrastructure for Export Scheme. The scheme has the objective to assist central and state government agencies for creation of appropriate infrastructure for growth of exports from the states. The scheme provides financial assistance in the form of grantinate to central or state government-owned agencies for setting up or for upgradation of export infrastructure, as per the guidelines of the scheme. Trade Scenario. Global trade tensions and slowdown had a negative impact on India's trade. As per the IMF World Economic Outlook, in 2019, the global economy and trade were estimated to grow by 2.9% and 1.0% respectively. This was a big fall in comparison to a global trade growth of 5.7% in 2017. For 2020, the projected trade growth is 2.9%, and India also expects to benefit out of this surge in the global trade. However, there was heightened uncertainty regarding the future structure of global value chains and the repercussions of trade tensions on technology, which may continue to weigh down the growth in world trade. The slowdown of world trade was caused by many factors such as slowdown in investment, reduced spending on heavily traded capital goods, and a sizable decline in trade in cars and car parts. As per the Economic Survey 2019-20, the major details related to India's current trade situation for April to November 2019-20 are as given below. Merchandise trade of India did show a mixed performance. Merchandise trade deficit is the largest component of India's current account deficit. On average, India's merchandise trade balance has improved from 2009 to 14, 8.6%, to 2014 to 19, 6.3%, although most of the improvement in the latter period was on account of more than 50% decline in crude prices in 2016 to 17. India's top 10 trading partners jointly account for more than 50% of India's total merchandise trade. With the top trading countries, USA and UAE, India has consistently run trade surplus since 2014 to 15. On the other hand, India has trade deficit continuously since 2014 to 15 with respect to other major trading partners, i.e. China PRP, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Germany, Korea RP, Indonesia and Switzerland. India had trade surplus with Hong Kong and Singapore till 2017 to 18, before it changed to trade deficit in 2018 to 19. The impact on India's exports of a slowdown in world output and appreciation of India's real exchange rate has been an outcome of increasing integration of India's exports with global value chain. The integration with the global value chain has increased following a relatively higher growth in manufacturing exports. In view of government's growing emphasis on Make in India program, increase in the share of manufacturing exports in total exports is inevitable. Petroleum, oil and lubricants, (POL) exports have a dominant share in India's export basket. However, since petroleum exports are a value-added pass-through of petroleum imports, exports net of POL exports reflects how broad-based India's exports are in generating value addition in the country. Growth in non-POL exports dropped significantly from 2009 to 14, 11.4%, to 2014 to 19, 2.6%. This is a challenge that needs to be addressed in times to come. Petroleum products continued to be the largest exported commodity in value terms. In terms of growth, it was drug formulations, biologicals, which grew the highest between 2011 to 12 and 2019 to 20. Export destination country continues to be the USA in 2019 to 20, April to November, followed by the UAE, China, and Hong Kong. Between 2011 to 12 and 2019 to 20, India's exports to USA grew the highest, 16.9%, with a share of 11.4% in India's total merchandise exports. Crude oil imports have a large presence in the import basket that correlates India's total imports with crude prices. Evidence also bears this out. As crude price rises, so does the share of crude in total imports, that increases imports to GDP ratio. Gold imports also have a significant presence in the import basket that correlates India's total imports with gold prices. While broadly that has been true for the two 5-year periods, 2009 to 14 and 2014 to 19, the share remained the same between 2018 to 19 and the first half of 2019 to 20, despite an increase in gold prices, possibly due to increase in import duty that reduced the import of gold. Crude petroleum had the largest share in import basket between 2011 to 12, 27.4%, to 2019 to 20, 21%. The share of electronics grew the fastest from a negligible share of below 1% to 3.6% in this period. China continues to be the largest exporter to India, followed by USA, UAE and Saudi Arabia. In recent times, Hong Kong, Korea and Singapore have also emerged as significant exporters. Services trade did show certain changes during the period. India's net services surplus has been steadily declining in relation to GDP between 2009 to 14, 3.3%, and 2014 to 19, 3.2%, fall to 3.1% in 2018 to 19, and 2.9% during 2019 to 20, in first half. The surplus on net services has been significantly financing the merchandise trade deficit. The financing reached its peak to about 2/3 of merchandise deficit in 2016 to 17 before declining to less than half in the last couple of years. Given a steady decline in net services to GDP ratio, the extent of financing will steadily fall unless merchandise trade deficit improves in relation to GDP. Service exports have consistently hovered between 7.4%, 2009 to 14, to 7.7%, 2018 to 19, of GDP, reflecting the steadiness of this source in contributing to the stability of BOP. The composition of service exports has remained largely unchanged over the years. Software services constitute the bulk of it at around 40 to 45%, followed by business services at about 18 to 20%, travel at 11 to 14%, and transportation at 9 to 11%. An increase in service imports to GDP ratio has a net negative impact on the BOP position. Over the years, service imports in relation to GDP has been steadily rising, putting pressure on BOP to worsen from 4.4% of 2009 to 14 to 4.3% in 2014 to 19, 4.6% in 2018 to 19, and 4.6% in the first half of 2019 to 20. Increase in service imports to GDP ratio of India is inevitable given a rising level of FDI and a gradual upscaling of the Make in India program. The relative shares of the various constituents of service imports have also not varied much, with business services constituting about 1/3 of service imports, which is in consonance with the rising level of economic activity in the country. The component of travel services has, however, been steadily increasing, reflecting the growing attractiveness of global destinations to the domestic tourists in the country. Current trade opportunity. The dynamics of global trade has gone for much change in recent times. Two factors have played very vital role in this change, one being the rise of protectionism in the world and the Sino-US trade tensions. By early April 2020, China was again in news for the pandemic COVID-19, in the wake of which several MNCs having production bases in the country were searching for alternative bases to continue their production. Thus, the current environment for international trade presents India an unprecedented opportunity to chart a China-like, labor-intensive, export trajectory and thereby create unparalleled job opportunities. To tap this opportunity, India should act in the following direction. assemble in India for the world should be integrated into the Make in India. By doing so, India can raise its export market share to about 3.5% by 2025 and 6% by 2030. Job creation out of this will be 4 crores by 2025 and 8 crores by 2030. The increased exports can contribute about 25% for making India a $5 trillion economy by 2025. The remarkable export performance of China in comparison to India is driven primarily by deliberate specialization at large scale in labor-intensive sectors, especially network products which are used in information technology for networking, where production occurs across global value chains, GVCs, operated by the MNCs. China used this strategy to export primarily to rich countries. In similar way, India should higher focus on enabling assembling operations at the highest possible level in network products. India's insecurity on trade front related to regional and preferential trade agreements can be overcome by tapping this opportunity, by promoting the cause of manufacturing industries. By evaluating the impact of India's trade agreements, for the period 1993 to 2018, we find that India's exports have increased by 13.4% for manufactured products and 10.9% for total merchandise, while imports increased by 12.7% for manufactured products and 8.6% for total merchandise. This way, we find a clear gain of 0.7% in trade balance surplus per year for manufactured products and 2.3% per year for total merchandise. Exchange rate monitoring. Indian currency has seen frequent exchange rate volatility in recent times. External variables have been changing more frequently than any time in past. This forces India to closely monitor the exchange rate dynamics of the world, its major trade partners, and the emerging competitors in its export market. India needs to rethink its exchange rate policy outlook and go for a shift in it. This becomes even more clear by considering the following points. 1. International trading opportunities are becoming scarcer in the aftermath of 3 major events: global financial crisis, the Eurozone crisis, and the stock market meltdown of China, 2015. The world export GDP ratio has declined since 2011. Going forward, a sharp rise in the US dollar is expected, with a corresponding decline in the currencies of India's competitors, notably China and Vietnam. Already, since July 2015, the yuan has depreciated about 11.6% from July 2015 to December 2016 against the dollar, and as a consequence the rupee has appreciated by 6% against the yuan. Given the situation, there has been a continuous pressure of capital outflows on India. 2. To sustain high growth rate, India needs support of exports in the coming times. And this is only possible once rupee's exchange rate is able to maintain the competitive edge over its competitors in the export market. The rise of countries such as Vietnam, Bangladesh, and the Philippines is a new matter of concern which compete with India across a range of manufacturing and services. 3. India's present exchange rate management policy gives unusually high weight to UAE due to high oil imports and a transshipment point for India's exports. But this trade has almost nothing to do with India's export competitiveness. The policy currently considers overall trade in place of the sectoral situations and their relations with the exchange rate. Due to this, India gives heavy weight to Euro, even though it is really Asian countries which are India's main competitors, not Europe. 4. Ever since the developed countries came under the Great Recession, we have seen unconventional monetary policy being pushed by most of them, with effective interest rates running in negatives. True. While the central banks in the West have been aiming to push up inflation and growth through it, RBI has been balancing them till March 2017. Given the situation, it looks advisable for the RBI, through Monetary Policy Committee, to recalibrate its monetary policy outlook. DIPA and BIT. Attracting adequate amounts of foreign investments was one of the major aims of the process of economic reforms which commenced in 1991. Accordingly, a model BIT, Bilateral Investment Treaty, was crafted by the government in 1993. Since then, India has signed 83 such treaties called the Bilateral Investment Promotion and Protection Agreements, BIPAs, with different countries, the first one with the UK in 1994 and the last with the UAE signed in 2018. They aim to increase foreign investments both way, inflows and outflows. Objective: these agreements aim to increase the comfort level and boost the confidence of investors by assuring a level playing field, non-discriminatory treatment, and an independent forum for dispute settlement. New BIT, in wake of the changes which have occurred in India and around the world since the first model BIT was announced, the government finalized a new model BIT in 2016 which is being used for renegotiation of the existing BIPAs, CECAs, Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreements, CEPAs, Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreements, and the FTAs, Free Trade Agreements. The essential features of the new model BIT are as given below: an enterprise-based definition of investment, non-discriminatory treatment through due process, national treatment, protections against expropriation, a refined investor-state dispute settlement, ISDS, provision under which investors to first exhaust local remedies before going for international arbitration, the ISDS to award monetary compensation alone, excludes matters such as government procurement, taxation, subsidies, compulsory licenses, and national security, to preserve regulatory authority of government. Meanwhile, renegotiation process under the new model BIT has faced resistance from some countries, though, out of the 83 BITs, by now, 72 are already enforced and rest of them are under the process of renegotiation. RTAs by India. In general, multilateral trade agreements are the first best solutions for deepening global trade and development as they are founded on the core principles of non-discrimination. Meanwhile, RTAs, regional trade agreements, are efforts by nations aimed at deepening economic relations, usually with neighboring countries, and tend to be largely political in nature. With the multilateral trade negotiations process under the WTO being a painfully slow one requiring broad-based consensus, RTAs have progressively assumed greater importance and a growing share in international trade. While RTAs are broadly compliant with WTO mandates and remain broadly supportive of the WTO process, they remain second-best solutions that are discriminatory in nature against non-members and are inefficient as low-cost producing non-members lose out to members. While bilateral RTAs have no equity considerations, mega-regional trading groups may not necessarily be equitable if membership is diverse, and small countries may lose out either way. If they are part of it, they may not have much say, and if they are not, they may stand to lose. India has always stood for an open, equitable, predictable, non-discriminatory, and rule-based international trading system and views RTAs as building blocks in the overall objective of trade liberalization as well as complementing the multilateral trading system under the WTO. By April 2020, there were 16 RTAs of India in force, which included 10 FTAs, free trade agreements, and 6 PTAs, preferential trade agreements, while 22 trade negotiations were in progress. FTAs in force, the 10 FTAs, spanning trade, investment, and technological cooperation, signed by India are, with Sri Lanka, the SAFTA, South Asian Free Trade Area, which includes India, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Bhutan, the Maldives and Afghanistan, Nepal, Bhutan, Thailand, ASEAN-CICA, including Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand and Vietnam, S. Korea CEPA, Japan CEPA and Malaysia CICA. PTAs in force, the 6 PTAs signed by India are APTA, Asia-Pacific Trade Agreement, which includes India, Bangladesh, China, Republic of Korea, Lao People's Democratic Republic and Sri Lanka, the GSTP, Global System of Trade Preference, GSTP, which includes 44 countries including India, namely Algeria, Argentina, Bangladesh, Benin, Bolivia, Brazil, Cameroon, Chile, Colombia, Cuba, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Ecuador, Egypt, Ghana, Guinea, Guyana, India, Indonesia, Iran, Iraq, Libya, Malaysia, Mexico, Morocco, Mozambique, Myanmar, Nicaragua, Nigeria, Pakistan, Peru, Philippines, Republic of Korea, Romania, Singapore, Sri Lanka, Sudan, Thailand, Trinidad and Tobago, Tunisia, Tanzania, Venezuela, Vietnam, Yugoslavia, Zimbabwe, SAARC Preferential Trading Agreement, SAPTA, which includes Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan and Sri Lanka, India, Afghanistan, India, Mercosur, Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay and Uruguay, and India, Chile. Ongoing trade negotiations. The 22 ongoing trade negotiations of India are with the countries or blocs such as EU BTIA, Sri Lanka ECTA, Thailand CICA, Mauritius SECPA, EFTA TEPA, Iceland, Norway, Liechtenstein and Switzerland, New Zealand FTA or CICA, Singapore CICA, SACU PTA, South Africa, Botswana, Lesotho, Swaziland and Namibia, BIMSTEC CICA, Bangladesh, India, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Bhutan and Nepal, GCC Framework Agreement, Canada FTA, Australia, Malaysia CICA, ASEAN Trade in Goods Agreement, Korea CEPA Review, Iran PTA, Peru Trade Agreement, EO Technical Consolations, Bangladesh CEPA, and Chile PTA. In the wake of changing dynamics of the global trade, India is trying its best to maximize its trade gains. In this regard, India mainly prefers to strengthen the tool of multilateralism, but it is also exploring the bilateral possibilities. New Foreign Trade Policy. The GOI announced the new Foreign Trade Policy 2015-20 on 1st April 2015. The new 5-year Foreign Trade Policy 2015-20 provides a framework for increasing exports of goods and services as well as generation of employment and increasing value addition in the country, in keeping with the Make in India. The focus of the new policy is to support both the manufacturing and services sectors, with a special emphasis on improving the ease of doing business. The special features of the FTP 2015-20 are as follows. 1. Two new schemes have been introduced, namely, A. Merchandise Exports from India Scheme, MACE, for export of specified goods to specified markets. B. Services Exports from India Scheme, SAYS, for increasing exports of notified services, in place of a plethora of schemes earlier, with different conditions for eligibility and usage. There would be no conditionality attached to any scrips issued under these schemes. Duty credit scrips issued under MACE and SACE, and the goods imported against these scrips are fully transferable. For grant of rewards under MACE, the countries have been categorized into three groups, whereas the rates of rewards under MACE range from 2% to 5%. Under SACE, the selected services would be rewarded at the rates of 3% and 5%. 2. Measures have been adopted to nudge procurement of capital goods from indigenous manufacturers under the EPCG scheme by reducing specific export obligation to 75% of the normal export obligation. This will promote the domestic capital goods manufacturing industry. Such flexibilities will help exporters to develop their productive capacities for both local and global consumption. 3. Measures have been taken to give a boost to exports of defense and high-tech items. At the same time, e-commerce, exports of handloom products, books or periodicals, leather footwear, toys and customized fashion garments through courier or foreign post office would also be able to get benefit of MACE for values up to 25,000 rupees. These measures would not only capitalize on India's strength in these areas and increase exports, but also provide employment. 4. In order to give a boost to exports from CES, government has now decided to extend benefits of both the reward schemes, MACE and SACE, to units located in CES. It is hoped that this measure will give a new impetus to development and growth of CES in the country. 5. Trade facilitation and enhancing the ease of doing business are the other major focus areas. One of the major objectives of new FTP is to move towards paperless working in 24/7 environment. B. The government has reduced the number of mandatory documents required for exports and imports to 3, which is comparable with international benchmarks. C. A facility has been created to upload documents in exporter or importer profile, and the exporters will not be required to submit documents repeatedly. D. Attention has also been paid to simplify various Ayat-Niryat forms, bringing in clarity in different provisions, removing ambiguities, and enhancing electronic governance. E. Approved Exporter System (AES) has been launched to enable manufacturers to self-certify their manufactured goods originating from India, with a view to qualifying for preferential treatment under various forms of bilateral and regional trade agreements. This will help these manufacturer exporters considerably in getting fast access to international markets. 6. A number of steps have been taken for encouraging manufacturing and exports under 100% schemes. The steps include a fast-track clearance facility for these units, permitting them to share infrastructure facilities, permitting inter-unit transfer of goods and services, permitting them to set up warehouse near the port of export, and to use duty-free equipment for training purposes. 7. Considering the strategic significance of small and medium-scale enterprise in the manufacturing sector and in employment generation, MSME Clusters 108 have been identified for focused interventions to boost exports. Outreach activities will be organized in a structured way at these clusters with the help of EPCs and other willing industry partners and knowledge partners. 8. Niryat Bandhu scheme has been galvanized and repositioned to achieve the objectives of Skill India. The FTP statement describes the market and product strategy and measures required for trade promotion, infrastructure development, and overall enhancement of the trade ecosystem. It seeks to enable India to respond to the challenges of the external environment, keeping in step with a rapidly evolving international trading architecture, and make trade a major contributor to the country's economic growth and development. The Government of India promised to have regular interactions with all stakeholders, including state governments, to achieve the national objectives. Need of shift. The environment for global trade policy has probably undergone a paradigm shift in the aftermath of Brexit proposal and the US elections. The Brexit was motivated by protectionist sentiments in the UK. Similar sentiments are being signaled by the new US government, too. This may lead to sharp appreciation in the US dollar. It has already appreciated 5.3% during November to December 2016, settling at 3.1% higher by January 2017, against an index of partner currencies. During the most protectionist phase of the USA, mid to late 1980s, a sharp rise was seen in the dollar, caused by tighter monetary policy and relaxing fiscal policy. A vacuum is being created in international trade leadership under the possible resurgence of protectionist pressures. In such a scenario needs to promote open markets and tap domestic growth. Similar moves are needed from the emerging market economies, EMEs, too. In this way, for India to specific opportunities arise, 1. India could get much benefits by promoting labor-intensive exports and negotiating free trade agreements with the UK and Europe. The potential gains for export and employment are substantial. Additional export of $3 billion, especially in the apparel and leather and footwear sectors, and additional employment of 1.5 lakhs. 2. The likely retreat of USA from regional initiatives such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, in Asia and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, TIP, with the EU. It is possible that the relevance of the WTO might increase. As a major stakeholder, and given the geopolitical shifts underway, India should proactively pursue to revive WTO and multilateralism. Trans-Pacific Partnership. The TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, is a new mega-regional agreement. The 12 Pacific Rim nations, Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore, the US and Vietnam, signed the TPP agreement on 5 October 2015. It is likely to set higher standards for goods and services trade and is considered a mega-regional FTA which can be a pioneer in many ways and is likely to be a game-changer for the world economy and global trade. The bloc accounts for around 40% of global GDP and around 60% of merchandise trade. In terms of economic size, it is larger than the existing NAFTA, North America Free Trade Area. The agreement is very comprehensive and not only encompasses the scope of tariff-eliminating mega-regional trade pacts, but also aims at 1. Setting higher global standards for international trade through lower benchmarks for non-tariff barriers, 2. More stringent labor and environment regulation, 3. Higher IPRs, intellectual property rights, protection, 4. Greater transparency in government procurement and limiting advantages to state-owned enterprises, so yes, 5. Transparency in healthcare technology, competitiveness and supply chain. 6. It also includes new and emerging trade issues and cross-cutting concerns such as internet and digital economy and participation of state-owned enterprises, so yes, in global trade and investment. Experts have highlighted serious impact on the current global trade pattern once this agreement comes into force. India has its own share of concerns regarding it. Meanwhile, by late January 2017, the USA, under its new president Mr. Donald Trump, pulled out from the ongoing negotiations of the TPP. Once the US, the biggest force behind it, has opted out from it, the pact looks losing its real steam. This may look a relief for India and other similar economies. It may be temporary, as the new dispensation in the country has given clear signs of becoming protective regarding trade and globalization. These issues were the benchmark of Trump's presidential election campaign. Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. Considered a companion of the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TIP, Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, is a newly proposed trade agreement, a regional trade agreement of different kind which includes investment also, between the European Union and the United States. Planned to be finalized by 2014, the pact is still, by March 2017, under the negotiation process. This agreement touches three broad areas: market access, Pacific regulation, and cooperation. The possible features and its impact are available in international media and other documents as given below. The major provisions included under this pact are dilution in regulatory provisions to promote trade and investment, liberal banking regulation, liberal role and access given to the transnational companies, diluting sovereign powers of the nations. As per experts, it could liberalize 1/3 of global trade and create millions of new jobs. As per the estimates of the European Commission, it will boost the EU's economy by 120 billion euros, the US economy by 90 billion euros, and the rest of the world by 100 billion euros. The agreement has been severely criticized and opposed by majority of the unions, charities, NGOs and environmentalists across Europe. Critics have highlighted several apprehensions also related to it, such as the number of net job gains, as there are chances of job losses, and low economic gains accruing at the household level. The reports on the ongoing negotiations and its contents are not available in the public domain, as only authorized persons can access them. Whatever comments, reactions or criticisms we find on it are on the multiple leaks which the world had by now through different sources. As in case of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, the new government in the USA, the most important force behind the pact, has dropped out by January 2017 itself. This way, the proposed pact looks becoming weaker before its finalization. And finalizing the partnership without USA is neither possible nor will it have much substance. In this case, the EU may be more open to new regional trade agreements with other nations. India may also explore one such pact with it. Deglobalization and India. Global factors are yet to stabilize since the financial crisis hit the developed economies. Recovery among these economies are getting tough job. Even unconventional monetary policies have been tried, pursuing for negative interest rate regime. Meanwhile, several of these economies have signaled protectionist rhetoric, the Brexit. The new government in the USA has already taken various protectionist measures by now, and many more are supposed to come in the coming times. Besides, in past few years the world has seen increased debate on the drawbacks of the globalization process. Among experts as well as several nations, a general feeling looked evolving against globalization. The negotiations related to the WTO look almost stalled. At the end of the tunnel, by late 2016, the world witnessed rise in the protectionist sentiments among important economies. The above given two events show as if the world, or at least the economies which matter most, has started to move slowly away from the much celebrated idea of globalization, deglobalization taking over the world, shrinking scope for multilateral trade and economic interdependence. Again, this lack of willingness towards globalization among different economies is not of the same degree nor universal to every economy. Better say it looks selective. India's prospects of export growth depends on its trading partners' carrying capacity of globalization to it. Today, for India, three external developments are of significant consequence. 1. In the short run, global interest rates, as a result of the US elections and the implied change its fiscal and monetary policy, will impact on India's capital flows and exchange rates. Experts are already expecting high fiscal stimulus, more dependence on unconventional monetary policy, etc. to follow in the developed world. 2. The medium-term political outlook for globalization, and in particular for the world's political carrying capacity for globalization, may have changed in the wake of recent developments. A strong US dollar and declining competitiveness might incline many countries to follow protectionist policies. This will result into declining global trade hitting India hard. 3. Developments in the US, especially the rise of the dollar, will have implications for China's currency and currency policy, which will impact India and the world. If China is able to successfully rebalance its economy, the spillover effects will be positive, otherwise quite negative. China, with its underlying vulnerabilities, remains the country to watch for its potential to unsettle the global economy. India's trade in goods and services both will be important in this case. India's services exports growth will test the world's globalization carrying capacity in services, depending on the restrictions in developed countries on two variables: firstly, the labor mobility, and secondly, outsourcing. It is possible that the world's carrying capacity will actually be much greater for India's services than it was for Chinese goods. After all, China's export expansion over the past 2 decades was imbalanced in several ways. The country exported far more than it imported. It exported manufactured goods to advanced countries, displacing production there, but imported goods, raw materials, from developing countries, and when it did import from advanced economies, it often imported services rather than goods, though capital goods is a major exception. As a result, China's development created relatively few export-oriented jobs in advanced countries, insufficient to compensate for the jobs lost in manufacturing, and where it did create jobs, these were in advanced services, such as finance, which were not possible for displaced manufacturing workers to obtain. In contrast, India's expansion may well prove much more balanced. India has tended to run a current account deficit rather than a surplus, and while its service exports might also displace workers in advanced countries, their skill set will make relocation to other service activities easier. Indeed, they may well simply move on to complementary tasks, such as more advanced computer programming in the IT sector itself. On the other hand, since skilled labor in advanced economies will be exposed to Indian competition, their ability to mobilize political opinion might also be greater. Precisely speaking, the political backlash against globalization in advanced countries and China's difficulties in rebalancing its economy could have major implications for India. And it will be advisable for India to close track of the changing global dynamics. Emerging scenario: it is true that nationalism and protectionism are on the rise, but stronger than them are the world's urge and dynamics for globalization. Experts believe that rather than deglobalization, a new kind of globalization is on the rise, driven by factors like newer technologies and new axis of multilateralism backed by resurgent bilateralism. The share of India in the world economy, From GDP point of view, India's dollar increased to 3.3% by 2018 from 2.6% of 2014 based on higher growth and increased interaction with the outside world. This gives the proof of the increased globalization of the Indian economy since we see nationalistic and anti-globalization sentiments among the developed countries. India, which has chalked out action-oriented plan to become a $5 trillion economy by 2025, is itself based on the active role of trade. This is why we find India busy exploring all possibilities to promote the cause of a multilateral trading world, without which India cannot achieve the growth rate of 10%, which is necessary to tackle the problem of high incidence of poverty and expansion of education and healthcare for all. Outlook for future. India's external sector remained vulnerable to several external variables throughout 2018 to 19. But it has gained stability in the first half 2019 to 20 with capital flows bouncing back through FDI, FPI and ECB's receipt of robust remittances and contraction of CAD to GDP ratio. The future concerns and related policy actions should be in the following direction. Trade partners of India have been building pressure for custom cuts in recent years. In this regard, the government needs to keep defending the custom regime as it is necessary for protecting its trade interests. The practice of inverted duty structure, i.e., lower custom duties on finished goods and in comparison, higher on the intermediate goods to produce them, has been hampering India's trade interests, under which custom duties are higher on the intermediate goods rather than the finished goods. At present, for several sectors, import elasticity of exports is greater than 1, which means that with 1% increase in imports of raw materials and intermediate goods, exports of finished goods from India increase more than 1%. Improving supply chain of the economy and integrating it with the global value chain will enable India to enhance its export competitiveness. In past, several of the free trade agreements signed by India could not benefit her due to disruptions of the value chain. Decreasing the delays related to clearances at ports and airports to speed up the movement of shipments. Several steps have been taken by the government in this regard, but still much needs to be done. The MSMEs should be getting healthy access to loans and structure of the GST regime should be streamlined for them. Macroeconomic environment should be made conducive for trade by signing suitable trade agreements, avoiding arbitrary taxes, restrictions and tariff. Attempting effective labor reforms and raising skills of the workforce will be giving an edge to India's exports.